Hello and welcome back to another episode of AZ Update. I'm Anthony Bartolo, joined today by producer Pierre. Producer Pierre, how's it going, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I decided to change it up a little bit today. I usually don the blazer, but I wanted to feel how it felt to wear a championship jersey.
Well, because your team's been eliminated. It's officially Springs. The Leafs are eliminated.
So for those of you who don't know, Toronto Maple Leafs hockey team eliminated last week from round one of the playoffs. Yet again, haven't won a first round since 2004. Yes, and your Montreal Canadiens are still going.
Exactly. My team eliminated your team, so it's kind of doubly sweet.
But the
plethora of goals.
The plethora of goals. Chelsea won the Premier League, and I had this jersey kicking around. It's the old Bartolo jersey that I used to play for a team. So I figured let's try out what a championship jersey looks like.
Are you fully kitted out right now?
I
got the shorts and
I have got the socks, the knee-high socks, and I have the short shorts. But I'm not going to show that on camera.
Nope, please don't.
So I wanted to do something different today. I wanted to talk about your post that you had shared yesterday because it caused a plethora of conversations.
And I'm going to be drunk by the end of this.
So everything that's going on right now in terms of conversation, you wrote a post yesterday on faking DDNS with Azure services. Let's talk about this. A lot of people, chimed in immediately, said, you could do this so many different ways. Just, why are you doing it this way? Let's talk about why you did it first.
Well, since the beginning of the pandemic, I've set up a network at home. Well, I always had a network at home, but now I've got a dedicated VLAN for my office and my stuff. I picked up all of the old machines that I had, some old laptops, some old desktops, some virtual machines on a beefy machine. And now I've got a full domain because we keep talking about hybrid because this is our sweet spot and how we use cloud services to and if you want to demo something like that, you actually kind of have to have an hybrid environment to kind of work with. So I've got my domain controller, I've got some servers, and I'm working some SQL work, very demo workloads. And I'm thinking, okay, now the stay-at-home order has been lifted, the vaccination's going well. I know there's a couple events that are already scheduled for November for in-person. I was talking to our friend Scott Kate, who's telling me that he's going to a hybrid event next week. Hybrid as in it's both online and in person. So I'm thinking, okay, how am I going to access this environment once we start working again? My ISP seems to be a little weird on how they manage the IP address. It could stay the same for weeks, and then all of a sudden in the span of 1 week, it'll change 5 times. So I can't depend on my IP address being the same so I can remote into my environment. So I wanted to... Hey?
In Canada, we have the situation where the ISPs, it's dynamic adjustment of IPs for your home service. If you want to go for a full business service, it's very expensive. It's not a inexpensive endeavor. And you have the scenario where you're paying all this money, but the service is the same. You just have a static IP assigned to your endpoint. So that's why this has been such a great post to be shared out because you alleviate all that. I know there are other services that are out there like Dyn DNS that provide similar type of services, but you actually went through and built out the solution and you incorporated a Raspberry Pi, to my understanding, as well as your gateway.
Yeah, so I've already have my wiredconnect.com zone managed in Azure DNS, and that was at the beginning as a demo of what you can do with Azure DNS. So I'm thinking, I don't want to be wiredconnect.dyn DNS. I don't want to use somebody else's network or name. I want to use my own because I own it. I paid for it. I want to use it. And it was kind of like the fun factor of trying to figure out how to fake DDNS with Azure DNS, because Azure DNS doesn't support DDNS and it doesn't support zone transfer. So it's not like I could take my internal server and configure it to send up the zone to Azure. It doesn't support that yet. So I had to figure out how to do it. And some people on Reddit jumped in and said, yeah, well, your way was a little bit more convoluted and way more complicated than it needs to be. You could do it in a single command line. Yes. However, I want this to run in the background every 12 hours. I don't want to have to put my credentials in there. I don't want to have to log in every time it runs. So I needed to figure out a way to do it securely that can grow, so I can actually have that same script running on other devices and just pass a different name so it'll update a different record. So, and the way I got it done is internally my DNS is sitting on a Raspberry Pi. So I got my DNS for the inside the house. I've got my own resolver, so I'm not using my ISP's DNS. Therefore, they're not tracking where I'm going. And I've got a Pi hole to cut on advertisement in the house. So I figured, well, it's already there. It's running. It's a Linux based. Right now, it's running on Debian Linux. So I figured I'll just put it on there. So the way I'm doing it, and let me share my screen, is I've got in a resource group, I created a Azure Function, and the Azure Function, first of all, under identity, I gave it a managed identity. So therefore, I can granularly assign the rights to that function as what it's allowed to do. And for the role assignments that I've got on that one is, see if that one is loading. Yes, it's loading. I've got DNS zone contributor assigned to that function. So it can only update records in that zone. It can't create a new zone. It can't set permissions to that zone. It can't change the configuration. It can only update the records that are in there. So that's fairly secure. So if that even gets compromised, there's not much they can do other than change the IP and basically hijack my website, but that's beside the point. Now, if I go back to my function, I've just got a little function in here that's called update DNS record. It's triggered by an HTTP or webhook. And what it does is it gets the webhook and it looks at either the query or the body. So depending on how I'm sending that information, it'll get the name and the IP address that I'm passing. It'll check the record that's already in Azure DNS. If the record doesn't exist for some reason, if I deleted it, it will go and recreate it. If it doesn't exist, it'll recreate it. If it does exist, it checks the old IP with the one I just passed. If it's the same, it does nothing and exits. If it's not the same, then it creates a record set and updates the record set in DNS, and then it kicks out. Now, on-prem, I'm running this, as I mentioned, on a Raspberry Pi, and I apologize for the dark mode online. It's a little harder to see. But it's really just one function to get my external IP. So I just check what my external IP is. I have a regex pattern to just identify to make sure that I'm actually passing an IP address and not something else. If it is an IP address, then I return it. Then I look and I do a dig home.wiredcanuck.com, which means I'm going to go to my DNS already to see if that IP address exists. If it does, then I don't need to update it. So I exit. If it doesn't, or if it's not the same, then I build the webhook and I send the webhook back to Azure, and then it updates. So by checking first, I'm not running the serverless function as often as I need to, and that way I'm not really costing too much money. And in terms of cost, I looked at my cost analysis for that solution, and according to, I'm trying to see if it's come back here. It's taken a while to refresh, but according to this, it's going to cost me 31 cents for the month.
Wow. Now, in regards
I
when the
could do
IPs
this
have
with
changed,
an outside service, but it would cost me a lot more in terms of subscription. It'd be a lot easier, but you know,
not not as fun.
not as fun.
Now, when the new IP is being addressed to your location, is there a gap in terms of how long until the service picks up? Hey, the IP has been changed. I need to change that in the registry. Is there a gap that you're actually down for that time?
Yeah, possibly. Because
Okay.
right now my script runs in a cron job every 12 hours.
Okay.
So it runs at midnight, then it runs at noon, twice a day.
But if you realize that you have no connectivity, you're obviously going to run the script manually, so that it'll pick up the address right away, right?
Well, if I'm home, yes. But if I'm away, I'm kind of stuck because uh, now I have no way of getting in to run the script manually to update the address. So it's like a chicken and egg thing.
Right,
But
right,
my next trick will be to set it up so that it monitors like I have a script that constantly run like 24 hours a day, and
right.
every minute checks, and then if it changes, then kickstart it. So, but I wanted to keep it simple for the first try. Plus, it was a way for me to illustrate how, with a little bit of imagination and a little bit of creativity, you can use multiple Azure services to fix an issue that you would have on-prem,
Right.
even though the individual services that you're dealing don't necessarily support the scenario that you want to achieve.
So, and that's the thing, right? And it's about what you're trying to achieve, as opposed to, yes, all these solutions are out there and all these capabilities are available, but it's more so I need to do specifically this, right? And so in your instance, you wanted to incorporate a lot of, you had already had Pi-hole in your architecture. You wanted to incorporate that. I think it was brilliant in terms of what you did. The blog post that details everything is shared on IT Ops Talk.
I got tons of pie holes.
Right.
They're so, but not pie holes, but Raspberry Pis. They're so cheap, and well, I use them like in my living room on the sound bar, in the shed in the background and backyard by the pool. There's an old stereo system with some speakers. It's close enough to connect to my network. So I turned these into Spotify endpoint, so I could just use my
Right.
phone and say play outside, and then it starts. So
So a couple of things that come up in the chat room too. Andrew McCollum is talking about using Splashtop because the ISPs in the UK block Teamweaver, so it's hard to unblock it to bypass use Splashtop's on some clients like LogMeIn. We have Paul Jensen joining us. He's saying, "Hey, was that a Continuum doc I just saw?"
No.
Live stream. So really cool. Paul Jensen actually has Splurge. And have it run what? Splurge and have it run every. Oh no, he's telling you to splurge and have it run every 6 hours at 62 cents a month.
I don't know if I can afford that, buddy. Sorry,
you
Paul.
have to give up on that Timmy's coffee. You wouldn't have been able to have that in the morning.
I haven't been to Tim's in probably a year.
Pandemic does that, doesn't it? It's good morning to Andrew McCollum. Good morning to Paul Jensen. We have Jay Shock up here too. I believe we also had, I thought we had, nope, Jay Shock is there. Paul Jensen, Andrew McCollum. Good morning to you all. Rabbit Jr. is also in here as well. Awesome to see you all in the chat room. Shall we start with the news?
Yes.
All right, let's go. It's going to be one of those shows today. All right. So first up, Azure Security Center GA and public preview updates. There are a plethora of updates. I'm going to say that a lot today. There's going to be a lot of drinking of water and coffee this morning.
And yes, it is coffee.
Coffee. New recommendations to enable trust launched capabilities is in preview. I'm going to mention a couple of them. This was a big one because you can actually have your resources slated as trusted resources to gain access to solutions and only allow those resources to do so. New recommendations for hardening of Kubernetes clusters. Another big one, if you're deploying Kubernetes into your environment, into your architecture, you want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward for all security practices. So this is also available in preview to provide suggestions in terms of setup. As Azure Defender for DNS, and for Defender for Resource Manager. So now that's become general availability. This does the tracking inside of your DNS and inside of your Resource Manager to ensure that all security capabilities are that are addressed for capabilities. What else do we got? We have open source relational databases. You may have heard the PostgreSQL announcement at Build, where there's a free tier 0. This will now go through and do an understanding of all your open source relational databases made available to your organization to ensure security, being capable and in essence addressing all attacks that are coming from that perspective. What's going on?
It's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful. It is a mouthful. Chat room's on fire. If you're watching the show live, definitely jump in the chat room. A lot of conversations going on right now. Sounds like it's very warm in the UK right now, which is really cool. What else we got? And so asset inventory to gets a cloud filtering environment. You can refine the connection points of your devices to your Azure services using the filter. Hugely popular in IoT and edge computing scenarios, but obviously in a hybrid scenario too, if you have servers on premises. Actually, I've seen a lot of manufacturers. C just announced a new server terminal that you can create. It's a almost like a edge computing device that can run Windows Server for whatever instance you want to run it for, or Linux if you wanted to run Linux for the management of IoT devices that are not smart. So we have that delineation now of IoT devices that just capture information and can't do any compute. They'll actually go to a gateway, which will be this seed server. We should see if we can reach out to them and they can lend us one to play with for a bit. And then that would do all the computation, and the results would then be put up to Azure, which is pretty cool.
Yep. No, I find Azure Security Center or any of the Azure services that consolidate information from a plethora of different sources is great because you get all of the information you need in order to have a meaningful analysis of your posture, like your security posture. If something's happening, you can actually drill down and figure out where the weak point was and address it. It's typically a user somewhere in your environment, but you can still address that person or that user or that machine.
So in our latest blog post, we've also included the video with Sarah Young, who does a fantastic job of going through the introductions of Azure Security Center. If you have not dabbled with that before, check it out, aka.ms/AzUpdate show, for all the blog posts that pertain to the show and all the articles that we're talking, the news that we're talking about, and their corresponding links to get more information.
Yep.
Pierre, you're up next.
I am up next. Give me a second here. I'm driving at the same time. So Azure Site Recovery has moved to a monthly update or monthly cadence, a little bit like a Patch Tuesday, but for Azure Site Recovery. So in its monthly cadence, it allows them to fix some issues and also enhance existing services. So this month, they've added support for configuring Ubuntu 20.04 long-term LTS as a master target server. This wasn't possible before. I think it was 18.04 was the last one that was supported, and now 20.04 is supported. Also, things that they added to it is added Linux supports for if you want to move or protect the machine from Azure to Azure. So now Oracle Linux 8.2 and 8.3 are supported, but they're also supported if you're doing it VMware physical to Azure. So right now, the Oracle Linux 8.2 and 8.3 are now fully protected, whether they're on-prem or in the cloud in terms of disaster recovery. We've also made a lot of changes in terms of API support for protection of VMM Flex. And if you don't know what VMM Flex is, we are working on a series with the VMM Flex product group that will be, keep an eye on itopstock.com. That'll be coming to you shortly. VMM Flex is really a new way of addressing scalability and availability for VMs. It's in preview right now. I think it's in private preview right now, but it greatly enhances what you can do with virtual machine scale sets, how you can manage them, how you can deploy them, how you can scale them. So keep an eye on that one. But they've already added some of the REST API support for VMM Flex in Azure Site Recovery. However, it's still not support when VMSS Flex scales up. Now, those machines that have been scaled up are not protected by default. So because it's in preview, there's still some work to be done, but that's about it for now. And of course, there are some bug fix on terms of like portal issues that they had. But one of the big things is that we have now got support for cross-continental disaster recovery. So if you think that the Americas is going to suddenly sink into the ocean and you want to protect anything from the US to another continent, it's now supported, but it's only supported in 3 region pairs. So we've got, let me make the list. Southeast Asia is paired with Australia Southeast. Southeast Asia is also paired with Australia East. And West Europe is paired with South Central US. So for North America, Europe, that's the pair. And from from Asia and Australia, those are the pairs. So you can set up your environment to be protected across continents. That was it. So
that was it. So the big thing to note too is that Rollout 55 was actually announced in April under public preview. And this is why, it's so important that you provide your feedback. It's taken to this time to go to GA because they incorporated a lot of the suggestions and the feedback that was provided. And that's why it's so important for you to do so. Going through the, any of the public previews that are being shared out, like what we reported before on Azure Security Center, we're very grateful for you to go out and test out the functionality and provide the feedback so that we can then go forward and Microsoft engineers can go forward and make the adjustments required to ensure that it achieves and meets the needs of a lot of people that are out there in terms of services being deployed.
But because it's a monthly cadence now, if we miss this month, then there'll be like you can work on it for next month. So keep your feedback coming. The link is right here below. And we'll make sure to pass it on to the product group.
Let's continue on. So next up, there are a plethora of updates for Azure Cost Management and Billing. It's an update show. There was so many updates, and I'm so surprised that all these got announced after build. Usually it's the week of build that all these updates come out. So cost management and billing updates, if you're faking your own DDNS implementation and you're worried about the 62 cents, you can capture it using
31.
Azure Cost Management. 31 cents, sorry, 62 is if you ran it every 6 hours instead of every 12, right? So in this scenario here, it's talking about all the updates that are coming to Azure Cost Management and Billing updates. I can't tell you how many organizations have reached out to talk about this. I know Sonia Cuff has written a couple of articles about this as well. So great to have an understanding and to budget in terms of your cloud spend. The one thing I really want to focus in on is if you are using Cloud9 prior to Azure Cost Management and Billing, you have until the end of this month to get off it and to go on to the Azure Cost Management because it is retiring. They are going to retire the service. I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that. There's also new cost management labs. So when new services come out, they're now being included into Azure Cost Management for that understanding of what your spend is possibly going to be. And so these new labs show you how to include those services from a cost perspective to have an understanding of what your budget should be for the services being deployed. And it's important because when you're talking to the organization in cloud implementation from a hybrid or in cloud scenario, you want to make sure that your organization is prepared to understand this is what you need to forecast for budget for this implementation and what the ROI is at the end of this when you've done the deployment.
Yep. Keeping an eye on your cost is always a good idea. You don't want to end up spending money on resources that are not utilized effectively or efficiently. Like I said, I can run my DNS on the Raspberry Pi. That costs me $35, or I could take a full-size machine and run the exact same thing. Which one's more efficient? For that particular role, that's the one. So in your Azure environment, keeping an eye on how those resources are being utilized and which one are actually costing you the most. Are they really using the full potential, or are you really using all? If you've got a G5 machines that's running at 2% utilization, maybe downsizing would be a good idea. Anyway, so
let's continue on. We got 5 minutes left of the show. Let's go into the events. I know it's gone by so quickly. Empowering teams. So Microsoft is throwing an event on June the 8th, and it's all about how to best put your best foot forward for your deployment of teams, for your management of teams, if applications need to be created or deployed amidst your team utilization, communication strategies. Great session, completely free for anybody to join. You can register here. Again, all the links for the events are available on the itopstalk.com blog or via aka.ms/AzUpdate show. It's also been a fortnight, and we have testing and production with producer Pierre and Steve, the audio guy. Got it right this time. So
I was waiting for it.
And check out their show today. The link again is inside of the blog for you to go in. It's completely free, and it's on Twitch, so you get to participate that way. Last but not least, Hello World is the daily show that happens every day at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, talking from everything that Microsoft Services has to provide from an operational to developer perspective. It's great to see, a lot of the participation from the engineering product groups coming in and talking about their services and their wares. So definitely check out this show as well. Last but not least, the Microsoft Learn module of the week. And producer Pierre, this one was picked out by you that coincides with the Faking DDNS blog post. Talk to us about it.
Yes. We're operations folks. We're IT pros, and all of our careers, we've worked with different tools to automate our environment. And sometimes we kind of and I don't want to generalize here, but I've talked to some people who have a kind of blinders on where, I'm not using that. That's a developer tool. That's for developers. And I wanted to prove that even though it's a developer, it was built for developer, it can be leveraged by operations in order to automate stuff. So Azure Functions is a great way of having PowerShell with proper rights and proper permissions affect change or affect automation tasks in your environment, whether it's on-prem or, actually Azure Functions is Azure Automation. It can be hybrid, but you can trigger them with a webhook, and the webhook is very easy. It can be secured. You can revoke the keys and change the keys when you need to. So I thought that this was a great way to have a little look into how you can use that and build Azure Functions with triggers so that you can build your PowerShell scripts they could be PowerShell, they could be Python, they could be any kind of scripts, and put them into a function so you don't have to maintain a VM just to run that script, and trigger them in a plethora of different ways.
This has been the Plethora of Update show. Producer Pierre, we have 1 minute left. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
I am and always will be at Wired Canuck.
And if you want to get a hold of me for some reason, you can do so on Twitter at Wireless Life. Producer Pierre, thank you for co-hosting the show today. It was really awesome to do so, and fun time for a plethora of jokes that we had all show. Everybody have a safe and wonderful weekend, and we'll see you all next Friday.
Cheers.